Alright, everyone, welcome to the review everybody has asked for. We're talking about Battletech Voidbreaker by Brian Young. I am going to set it up with. I know a lot of people in the community have mixed opinions of Brian, and we will go over this book. I think this was literally 7 people asked me to do this review, so uh, my last video had 42 views so far. Don't care, but Um, so that is a good number of people who actually asked for it. So this came out in January 24th. 387 pages, but it's more like 330, 340. Um, Actually, it might even be less than that, maybe 320, because I'll show you the table of contents once we get there. It's currently sitting at 4.2 of 35 ratings on Goodreads. Or not on Goodreads, on Amazon. We'll get to Goodreads in a second. It is currently selling 127, 165 for a 3-month-old book that's actually 4-month-old now. That is doing okay. And just a quick, you know, reviews, and then not many written reviews actually. Let's see more reviews. So, realistically, a lot of the reviews are kind of the actual written reviews. There's a lot of 5 stars, and then there's a lot of 3 and 2 star reviews that 1 star. um, one. Okay, so as you can see, all right. On Goodreads, you can see my review is 2. Um, 4.7 of 36 and 5 written reviews. So it's doing a 4 and above in both places. Uh, as you can see, quite a few other Battletech books. You've already seen my Blood Will Rise review. It's not gotten any better. So, a lot of people have been asking, actually, and I've seen a lot of misquotes of this book because they've heard something and they think that is what has actually happened. So we're going to go over this. This might actually be a pretty long video right now. So let me see here. Is this a table? Yep, table of contents. We've got title page contents dedicated. This is a primer on what's going on in the beginning of the Ill Clan era, which is anything after 3150 or 3151 actually. You got part 1, part 2, which is really nothing. Part 3, part 4, acknowledgments about the author. One thing you don't see in many of the other Battletech books, they literally slurp Brian Young's cock here. Unfortunately. So basically, it is. And then he also had this acknowledgement page, which yeah. The many, the eras, the mini TROs, typical Battletech stuff. But like I said, there's a couple extra pages here. I think the acknowledgments is 2. The more fiction for Brian Young. If we go here, it takes up. Let's see. Actually, Honor's Gauntlet is still probably his best book. It was his first Battletech book. Where is crap? Oh, close that. Ugh, Foxtails. Question of survival. A question of survival wasn't that hateful, but it was hateful. Without question, is probably one of the worst Battletech books I've read. The only thing worse, in my opinion, was actually okay. I'll put A Lair of the Law above it, and will put Blood Will Rise below it. because Lair of the Law wasted my time, and whatchamacallit, Blood Will Rise wasted my time and was just a bad book. And it was boring. It honestly was boring. So, this is considered to be book 121 of Battletech. I'm not sure how they're counting that. If that's just the mainline Battletech, if they, it's one of those where they've changed things so much that it's hard to tell. Let's see here. Battletech Fiction Series. Okay. Because the first one ended at 50, right? Actually, no. It went to like, Jesus, 60. Okay, so they did put the Dark Age books in there as 61 through, should be like 91. Yeah. And then we've had 92 through 91's a little questionable because it's Bonfire of Worlds, which was kind of their first Battletech book in a couple of years. Rest in peace, Steve Mohan Jr. And then we went into what was now the Battletech. So we're at 120 here, bunch of novellas, omnibuses. We're looking at about 200 and some pieces of fiction. So, all right. So this book takes place in the Ill Clan era. So anything after 3151. And let's go. Hey, where's my... Okay, here we go. Okay, so, there's about 4 main characters in this, or actually probably more like 6. There's Kinja Rodriguez, who is a blood-named Sea Fox character. She's a Star Colonel, and then she was trained under Seth, who is her mentor. Starts off, there is a little bit of sexual tension there. There is Tucker Harwell, which, if you've been a long time fan of Battletech, he was the gentleman who was basically put in charge by Comstar to try and get the HPG network back up. Unfortunately, that also led to him being tortured by Comstar to get the HPG network up by his own sister. That's actually a plot point in the book. There is Alexa Holt, sorry. There is Star Captain Perennial. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but what I'm going to call her is Schoolgirl from now on. And we'll get into why. She's a 20-year-old clan warrior. Her first major assignment, I guess, is to be the assistant to Star Colonel Rodriguez, who, as a character, I actually did not mind. Just to leave it at that. She is probably one of the better characters that we've seen lately. Okay, so this is just her going. I also feel that Seth is a self-insert for Brian Young, and he has this wonderful word that he loves to use, which is, where is it? No. Coiffed. He used this like multiple times in the book. So this is basically what I put in this note is basically this was a self-insert. If you looked at the description, it's pretty close. All right. This is when this book is basically Mission Impossible 1. I like saying that because a little things get a little scrambled, but the main set pieces for the book. When you put them together, it equals basically Mission Impossible 1. So Kinja, and Seth get sent on a mission into this wonderful party. They're supposed to get some data. Um, you know, Kinja shows up wearing a dress. That's where Seth kind of starts hitting on her. And then they go in. They meet the crowd, the CEO of Iran. What was the name of this? They just call it ITCC. Um, so basically, he's in debt to the Sea Foxes. He's not paying, so they're stealing this data to just basically tell him. But there was a weird thing in here, and of extreme moral flexibility, and was dangerously in debt. He had not paid back the loans and bonds backed by the Khan yet. He was half the reason they were here, but instead of killing them, So if you kill somebody, you cannot collect their debts. Sounds like smart business to me. Okay, so we're going 9 chapters now. So basically, Kenja basically watches Seth get his head blown off. And we'll get into that later. So basically, if you've seen Mission Impossible 1, Ethan Hunt sees Phillips get stabbed, fall, die. And if you know the rest of the movie, you know what happens at the end. So basically, this was, I believe, an elemental, but she was smaller, and yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, that's not physically possible a lot of times, unless, yeah. Okay, so basically, they're tracking down. We're getting to the point where they're tracking down wonderful Tucker. He's escaped Terra, Alexi Holt, and Trimmer, who is another knight who are protecting him, and they get stopped by a Belter ship, or the Belter ship is what they basically go to. And basically, Kinja and her team infiltrate the Belter ship to find out what they know. And here we go. They all wore midnight blue bordering in green piping and had some signs of cyberware, including bionic ear implants that would make them immune to stunners, wildly nasty personalized weapons, some boar furred ears like animals. One had a prehensile tail of cybernetic spider monkey, or no two were like. Belter market report that warned the Belter spacers on the fringes of the society had a penchant for extreme body mods. So here comes the space furries. I am surprised that Brian has not got some hate for this, because he slaughters the space furries. So Petrichor, who I will call Schoolgirl, basically is, like I said, a 20-year-old clan warrior. And after seeing the butchered space furries, she actually just has a mental and emotional breakdown. And just kind of was like, okay. Usually, by the time that a clan warrior is like 7, they've at least seen 3 people die. So, all right, coiffed again. um, yeah. Okay, this was a one that actually a lot of people had issues with when I actually posted this to places. Usually, when you talk about protege, you're talking about, okay, you have the thinker, and then you have uh, generation 1, maybe 2, possibly a third one, depending on the time frame. Um, if you go by 5 years or if you go by 10, especially in the ancient world where 10 years, you're talking somebody went from 30 to 60, and chances are they aren't even alive anymore. So this one kind of rubbed me the wrong way because a protege wouldn't be somebody who was 500 years later. Um, but it's about Cassie DeBurke, who is the basically the person who took Kearney and Fuchada's knowledge and turned it into the HPG network. Okay. All right. A young protege. Yeah. Okay. So again, the whole protege thing. All right. Okay, I can't trust. We can make a deal. I'll let you go if you tell me who you're working for. I can't trust that. Besides, mercs don't welch on contracts. Um, there is consistently words of or instances of mercs breaking contract, welching on contracts, doing whatever to save their own skin. It's not that unheard of in the Battletech universe. All right, I do have to say Brian has actually improved his battle writing. There's been still some issues here and there, but this is closer to what we are used to in text form of a battle. The Havoc and the Battlehawk open fire. Hey, somebody remembered the Battlehawk actually existed. Or the Havoc's battery of medium lasers lit up the bazaar, but missed Kinja's maelstrom, carving scars into the facade of the Seafox building. Uh, Armor across the snout of the maelstrom. Okay, not hateful. There's a bunch of it. It was just kind of like, you know, okay, it's not that bad. Oh, that's just a bookmark. Bye, bookmark. I don't need you. All right. The thing about Kinja, she's actually a true believer. She thinks the clans are the only people who can save the Inner Spear, actually, the universe, basically. um, so it's kind of weird to see again because it's been so long since we've seen a main character that actually believes that. Um, but she doesn't believe in that the conquest is the actual necessary. So she's more of a warden than a crusader. All right, so they received info from the Scorpion Empire, which basically is on the outskirts of nowhere, and they basically have provided basically the earliest tech specs for a HPG that they could find, and that was some of the info that was able to assist in getting the wonderful HPG's solution. All right. So this was an instance of something we found when reading. Voidbreaker station, the name Kinja had given to the station in this phrase, the operation to repair the HPG network was on Hyen and the legacy of the Federated Commonwealth Civil War. Catherine Steiner David, if you remember, had the real time communications between New Avalon and Thakard. And this basically, I'll sum it up, is almost not quite word for word repeated in this book, but a good chunk of it is used again. Let's see. So yeah, how I was reading it, must have had to use it twice because it got cut. Um, so they consider, or Tucker actually considers the HPGs to actually be lost tech because right now they can't build them. Oh yes, this one we're getting into the good stuff. Um, Schoolgirl. She decides after a couple things she's wants to hook up with her mentor, and this is where I think some things are getting a little too real, and basically, yeah, the mentor turns her down. But I, it's a common theme in Brian Young's work, so take that as you will. All right. So the big question everybody's asked is, what actually happened to the HPG network? What was the solution? And this entire chapter, unfortunately, which is chapter 22, Breakthroughs and Setbacks, this entire chapter is nothing but the entire exposition dump. So it's about 50% through the book. Actually, it's pretty much 60 through the novel. Um, as you can see, I have highlighted way too much. So we also get some. Basically, they took a list out, started crossing off names of who could have done this, which is cool. Even though CGL will probably never tell us who actually done it. I do have an actual good theory of why, and this would be the best way to write this. I can do another video if you guys would like on that. But it would basically be the reason that there's no payoff is the character died for the early blackout period. So basically through from 3032 to 3038, everything that happened was the cause of one person. But unfortunately, the person was who set all of the emotions been dead, um, and it kind of goes there. Uh, so basically, they said the Comstar thought about it. They had the Clarion protocol, realized it was stupid, and basically said, "Oh, we're not going to use it." They had their old virus, but the actual Clarion protocol was never actually really integrated. Um, so the Republic started bringing together, disrupting incredible wide area of space. So, and this goes into why I think that it's who I think caused it. Then we know that so basically disrupted the band of hyperspace. So this is basically the Star Trek Discovery. Uh, oh God, the burn. It's basically the burn, except without the crying kid. Um, okay, so basically, the reason they didn't receive the virus packet that caused all the issues, um, and then others it just didn't work on, even though it might have been they were carriers, but not necessarily damaged by it. That's why here we go. Mobile HPs work differently, um, because they have a high error ratio. Okay, that makes sense. They're mobile, so they're not really uh, staying in the same spot. So it's kind of like instead of being this, they're going like that. All right, makes sense. All right, who caused the blackout then? Comstar, the Word Blake, or someone else? And here is where CGL basically admits that they will never answer this because why would they actually do good storytelling? Why would they actually finish a story? Why would they actually make money? So basically, Tucker Schultz, frankly, I doubt we'll ever know for sure. I have enough evidence to believe Devlin Stone himself, Eckarch of the Republican Spirit, may have put the plan together. I think this is a key word here that he might have had the plan together. Um, some unknown entity stumbled upon. Okay, that's why the person I think did this did it, um, because it's the one person I think who would have the supply, the ability, the knowledge, and people would follow. It doesn't really matter why anyone did it. Yes, it does. Anybody who's bought Battletech for 20 or 30 years, even the new age grownards who are 30, 67 and before, probably would like to know, at least if they ever want to move past, because it's like Battletech has always had a sliding scale of where the grownards sit. Originally, it was 30-25. Now we're at 30-67. Anybody? There's still some 30-25 people out there, but there's a lot more 30-67s. And then soon we'll probably have people who will go up to Dark Age, or through Dark Age, but won't do a clan. Anytime there's a new era, basically in Battletech, there's a huge section of the community that just stops. That we don't know what caused. We don't understand why. So that makes it hard to understand how to develop a fix. Two-part solution. First is a physical targeting modulator. Okay, makes sense. We're now going from tight beam to a little bit wider beam, because that's how the original network was set up. Then we're working on some code, blah 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 blah. So basically, what they added was, not only are you going from this tight beam to the wider beam, we're now adding some fuzzy logic into this, to basically make it where it doesn't do what it's been doing. Yay. So the virus is basically going to be present, and it's just going to stay there because it can't be really removed. So they have to do the hardware upgrade, the software upgrade, and get there. So yeah, there was, I think in the Comstar source book they announced that there was ways that you could reach normal non HPGs, with satellites and transceivers, but unfortunately that will no longer work, which is fine. All right, so we are now into this. All right, go back to my thing here. All right, here's the first thing. Fox Filibuster Brigade was a relatively new unit, and it's another Kellhound successor unit. Every single new unit that's being introduced into Battletech seems to be a Kellhound successor unit. Just a little quick thing. The Kellhounds, for almost most of their time, barely reached one regiment of units. There was about 18 years that they were 2 regiments. There was quite a bit of time that they were a battalion. It's kind of hard to say that there would be this many successor units when you have other units that were much larger. The Dragoons, you kind of get, they're basically a monolith, so you're not going to have the units fall over and leave unless something happens. You know, and the big thing that happened to them was the whole Ill Clan thing, and they're a lot of the people who didn't like where things were going, either or who went with the clan and didn't fight back ended up dead, uh, or executed. So, you know, there should have been probably some schism there, but it was very heavy handed. Okay, here's where I was talking about that one section was kind of copied and pasted again. Between New Avalon, Thackard, blah blah blah. It was part of the whole thing for Katarina Styre Davian. All right, schoolgirl starts crushing on another girl, but then realizes she likes Kinja too much. Both of these sections right here are basically about. So this is about her staring at Patel, who is the leader of that unit, that is the Kellhound successor. Then schoolgirl. Oh nope, I'd rather just be with Kinja. All right. So this custom, it's one of those weird things. It's got to be a Brian thing because it, you know, a gunner named Grace. Okay, Grace, fine. And a Sikh driver named Bisham. Okay, you have no idea what Grace is, but we actually have to specify who Bisham is. They could have just put Bisham. And it's done twice or three times in this book. Um, so it's one of those where it's like, use the name, keep going. Nobody knows, you know. All right, two Bishamuns. They actually remembered that mech exists, which is kind of scary. Give me a second. Because I need to bring this up for where's search? Ah, come on. There's a page that has a stupid list of quad mechs. Okay. Sarna has 33 of them. There's a couple duplicates like the Stalking Spider. This is all going to pay into the next one. Okay, so look, two Bishamens. They were quadrupedal mechs. Rare in the mech world. Okay, yeah, quads are kind of rare. And mediums. Okay. Rare is still in the world of quad. There's 33. So we've got Arana. That is a quad industrial mech. It's a medium. Bishaman, medium. Blue Flame, medium. One of these. Oh, the Solaros, I believe, is a medium also. The Sarath, medium. Stalking Spider, 1 and 2, mediums. Thunderfox, medium. The Tolva, medium. Huh. That covers about almost half of the 33 mechs are mediums. I just caught this one last night when I was reading it. I was like, I don't remember this line. Yeah. And oh, the rhino here. I didn't really count it because it doesn't have a picture, but it's from the Scorpion Imperium. It's also medium. So yeah, half of them quads are medium mechs. Not really. All right. Alexi Holtz. She was a good character, honestly. In the early Dark Age, you met her in Targets of Opportunity, I believe. Um, and she's basically been the White Knight for Tucker for like 3 or 4 books. The only time you really didn't hear about her was when Tucker was underneath. He found Devlin, and basically that's when you didn't hear about Lexi as much. But basically, Alexi's telling Kinja that she's being an idiot. That basically they're on their way to Ty Cross after getting the first 2 nodes set up in their new HPG network. It works. The second node doesn't work because it doesn't have a power supply. They hotwire a truck into it or a hovercraft. It works for receiving. It can't be transmitted, but it receives. Jesus. So Alexi's been her bondsman for quite a bit of time, or at least probably a couple months now. And basically, Alexi's trying to tell her that her trying to save these people is stupid because they have a more pressing interest in getting um, the wonderful Tucker to Ty Cross, and that should be their main mission. And saving some people who might be a setup isn't the smart thing to do. Okay, she suspected repeated that the ex paladin. Does anybody remember if Alexi got promoted to paladin? Because I don't. I could have sworn she was just a knight. Ah, yes. All right, sorry about that. My internet cut out for a brief 15-minute period. So, where were we? Cross examination. No, that's not what I'm looking for. All right. Wonderful, proud feminist Alexi. Again, going over the whole bondsman, bondswoman, blah, blah, blah. So Kinja finally faces Seth, and basically they end up being in. He's trying to torture her. It's stupid, kind of. It's a pretty bad fight. It's just 1-on-1, which okay. And then Tucker basically hits him with a steel chair from the top rope, and Kenji stabs him, and that's it. And the reason he basically was like, "Oh, you treated me like a person instead of a thing," which honestly, Tucker's been treated like a thing for about 20 years. So basically, everything ends up. The mercs that they were fighting decide, oh yeah, we're yeah we're out. Sorry. Um, let's see. You learn that Tremor is actually a ghost knight. All right, that's fine. So basically, Kinja, Tucker, and Alexi will kind of be working together to bring up the next more of the HPGs. Like I said, a lot of the set pieces in this book are basically Mission Impossible 1. The first scene, if you actually read it, it's basically the whole wire act where and shootout. Actually, it might be more closer to the shootout in the biolab in um, Mission Impossible 2, but it's basically the same concept. Um, Seth appears to have his brains blown out and by a laser pistol, and then shows up with a steel plate in his head. Okay, whatever. Um, so, like I said, something not usually done that much, maybe a short blurb, is a 2-page. Brian has his acknowledgments. There is a word where he actually gives out a shout out to Blaine and Steve Mohan Jr. for Tucker Hall, the couple characters that appear in this book. So they actually did give some credit to some of the older guys. Like I said, rest in peace, Mr. Mohan. He was actually a pretty good writer for Battletech. He came up, in Battletech, and he did well. Then this, and then, like I said, TRO, blah, 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 blah. And we are done with the book. So, basically, they hand wave the whole HPG issues away, and it's kind of depressing that they don't want to just solve the questions that exist, because there's so many open mysteries currently in Battletech. We're going on 100 years and we still don't know who the hell the green ghosts are. Yet they still keep popping up everywhere. We still, the Wolverines are still out there. God, there's still all these other units and such, and mysteries that we don't know. Like I said, I have an idea that would probably be A, the activists could get their win and nobody would care. B, it would probably explain everything because there's only a few people who would know about Clarion, who could have knights follow them or listen to them or do what they said. Could get the senators all to, herd those cats. Have the resources to back Branson, have the resources to do this, do that, and attack the wonderful HPG network. It's a very short list. They throw out Wobbies, they throw out the clans, not the homeworld clans. And honestly, once you go down the list of items, it doesn't make sense. There'd be one thing. Okay, so Wobbies know about Clarion Call. No knight's going to follow the Wobbies. Unless, again, it becomes that the entire Republic of the Spear is nothing but Wobbies, and that's another. Yeah. The clans, they're not going to know about Clarion. Even, that's going to be maybe the original Paladins, maybe a couple other people. I was thinking originally a bureaucrat, and then I was like, wait, let's really make the list of what would cause the HPG to go down and who would actually have the power. Then I started tying in, the first 10 years of Dark Age, which is basically up, well, it's really like 7, but it's basically up to Fortress Republic. And it just didn't make much sense once you start looking at who could be behind all these things and who would be in position with the authority to push it up. Because even Devlin Stone doesn't make much sense, because when Tucker wakes him up, he's shocked that somebody actually fired Clarion. So, yeah, that makes no sense. He's like, then he almost looks like somebody stabbed him when they tell him that Levin is the wonderful Exarch. It's just like, okay, yeah, it's not gonna be Devlin because it's not going to make sense. Like I said earlier, I think the reason that all the threads never got pulled together was the mastermind actually was dead. and he started the ball rolling with like Branson, with the Senators, with Comstar being rearmed, the Rhodes Project. There's only like one or two people who could actually be behind everything and it actually make sense once you start to cut off all the limbs. But that is for a different video. I give Voidbreaker a. I am going to definitely temper expectations. Voidbreaker could have been a good book. Brian Young had to be Brian Young, and that's the problem with Brian Young. He's actually gotten better at writing his battles. I'll give him that. Last time I read one of his books, which was the Ghost Dog book, he forgot about a mech that he killed in like the second paragraph of combat. That mech ends up escaping. Don't ask me. It's just it's there. um, so I am going to subvert expectations, like CGL has constantly done since basically the Ill Clan. And I would say I'm going to give this book a 45 out of 100, um, which places it as a really a C minus in my scale. As you notice, I gave it a 2-star review. I would probably give it a 1.5, 1 3/4 star. Because if I were to remove Brian Young's name from the book, remove all the Brian Young isms, like I said, the whole, having to explain certain things the way he does, it would be an average Battletech book. And again, I know that some people have their issues with Brian. I have huge issues with his books. um, but this one I actually am kind of torn on it could have been good. So far I still think his Archer Pride book is his best. Anything with the new Falcons I think is horrible. And is just getting worse and worse. Like I said, there is a couple wonderful threads that he loves, especially with older men and young girls, or older teachers and young girls. We won't go into it, but that is a common thread in his books. You have Ghostbird and Bussin' Juju, and you have in this book you had actually 3 levels. You had Seth and Kinza, and then Kinza and Schoolgirl, and I mean, it gets laid on thick a little bit there. So I'm not sure if that's where we're going with that. But like I said, if this was any other writer, it would probably be an enjoyable book. But Brian had to Brian himself too close to the sun and actually took away from the book being good. Them hand waving the HPG stuff, yeah, it's fuzzy logic and a wideband sensor instead of going for a closed band. That's it. That was the solution. That's that could have been so much more. And them basically admitting in a paragraph that they're never going to reveal who caused the blackout. It's just sad, and it's a sad state for CGL novels, for Battletech. And I know I'm not the only one. I know there's many of you out there who actually at one time enjoyed the setting and probably had a good run up on where it was going, and now it's just the whole Dark Age era is done, and we're moving on until the Ill Clan. And honestly, the Ill Clan is. I actually like the Jihad. The Ill Clan makes the jihad look great. um, so far I've been relatively disappointed with the whole Ill Clan era, but that is for another day. I might do a video on explaining my setup for who would be behind the HPG blackout, why. Like I said, I'll give the activists a win in it too because it makes sense. Um, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone. Please do the wonderful YouTube pleasantries of like, subscribe, maybe do alerts, but I doubt it because I don't do that many videos. Um, and most of you guys know how to reach me. There's my wonderful YouTube and Instagram. Actually, that Instagram might be old, but thank you, everyone. Have a good day. I need to try and stitch these two videos together now.